Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this time and space. We have this wonderful presence of three of our distinguished colleagues. I think we have Marcel Parker, who many of you have enjoyed listening to him in the past and listening to his story through the eyes of Arvind Agarwal and T.V. Rao in the book. And we have, of course, Dr. Santrup Mishra. Santrup is a dear friend and colleague, and he's had a remarkable journey of his own. And of course, Harish, it's been a privilege of knowing him again for a very long time. And it's been very, very joyful for me to not only know them and professionally, but to learn about them through these stories. Some of the things that are written in their stories, even I was not aware of, although I have known them for such a long time. So thank you very much for coming this evening. Thank you for the gift of your time. And I'm sure our students and the soil community is going to enjoy a lot learning with you and learning from you. With this, I will shut my video off and audio off, and I will encourage my colleague, Professor Bhattacharya, lovingly known by everybody as A and B. So A and B, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil. Thank you. So good evening, all of you. This is a wonderful opportunity. And as Anil said, this particular platform is primarily meant for, our students getting to learn from the leaders straight from the horse's mouth. So what we have done is we have actually handed it over to the students. They'll be doing the rounds on their own. So may I request Aditya to start with your introductions.
Yeah, thank you, sir. That was a very good introduction that was given by Anil Sachdev, sir. He's the founder of our School of Inspired Leadership. Good evening, everyone. Along with Saikat and Vandana, we'll be hosting this event. And we thank you all for joining us for this panel discussion of leaders in making with the crucibles of change makers of HR today on the February 2nd. The basis of this webinar is based on the book Leaders in Making, which includes in-depth interviews of HR leaders drawn from public as well as private sectors, and has excellent lessons for students, managers, HR leaders, and CXOs. The book also includes self-help tools to assess competencies, values, and the careers of readers so that they can plan for self-development. With this, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Mr. Devrajan Harish, who is a 1983 batch XLRI alumni, who is the recipient of Nanjunda Rao Memorial Gold Medal for the best all-rounder student. He started his career with TVS Sundaram Fasteners Limited and went on to serve as the Vice President of HR Services at Unilever. He has also been the President of NHRT Bangalore Chapter and Conference Convener for 15th National Conference of NHRT Network. He has also served as an Independent Director on the Board of Bank of India and is a leadership coach and an organizational consultant, where his primary focus is on supporting pursuit of excellence in organization performance and leadership effectiveness. The second panelist for us is Mr. Marcel Parker, who is a notable alumnus from St. Stephen's College and IIM Ahmedabad. He started his careers with Voltas and has went on to work with the Wazir Sultan Tobacco, Coromandel Fertilizers, East India Hotels, Modi Xerox, Bharat Shell, SAP India, Raymond, and Quest Corporation. He also owns Marcel R. Parker Associates, which provides executive coaching, competence assessments, talent management, and general HR consulting, along with teaching and training. The third panelist for us is Dr. Santrup Mishra, who is currently Group Director for Carbon Black, Director of Chemicals, and Director of Group Human Resource at Aditya Birla. He has 2 PhDs, one in Public Administration and the other in Industrial Relations. He is a Fellow of the National Academy of Human Resources, USA, an Honorary Fellow for the Coaching Federation of India, an Eisenhower Fellow, an Aston Business Fellow, and an AIMA Fellow, He is also a Commonwealth scholar. He also serves as an independent director on the Oil and Natural Gas Corporation Board and is the chairperson of the Board of Governors at NIT Rourkela. He is also the member of Managing Committee of Aston Business School Advisory Board and board member at XIMB. We are delighted to have you here today and look forward to hear your insights. The webinar provides an opportunity for our soil students to learn from such experienced professionals in the industry. Your presence here is today a testament of your commitment to the growth and development of our students. We believe that with your knowledge and expertise, we will add great value to the webinar. Now, I would request our first panelist, Devranjan Harish, to take a few questions from Saikar Ghosh. Saikar, over to you.
Hello, everyone. So my first question to Mr. Harish will be, sir, how do you ensure in times of uncertainty that your employees are motivated to do their best to sustain the business while at the same time having compassion for their peers? So if you'd like to share your views on that.
Yeah, as human resource professionals, our primary focus is to make sure that we get good people, we motivate the people, and we actually help and support them to perform to their potential. And this, under normal circumstances, itself is quite a task. And when times are a little tough, as we have experienced in the last few years, it becomes quite a challenge. And that's when suddenly human resource professionals are in great demand. Suddenly you are in the back room and now everybody is running after you to make sure that you sort of advise, support, and enable the leaders in the organization to be able to get the best out of their people. And that's the job of every leader, right? Every leader needs to make sure that they inspire their people to better and really outstanding performance. And when times become tough, they are at their wits' end sometimes as to how could they do this, because the normal stuff that they do doesn't necessarily work here. What happens when you are not able to see them? What happens when your business is really down the pipe and you're letting go of people, and the people that you have, their morale is down? Yeah. And that's when I think empathetic engagement becomes extremely important. And what most good HR professionals do all the time, they have to now ensure that the leaders do it as well, because it's not one person's engagement. It's not the parties that you have. It's not the get-togethers that you have that work. It's the engagement, the genuine, authentic engagement with your employees. And if you have done that over a period of time, this is not a challenge. But if you have not done it, you need to begin to do it. And the crux of that engagement is really trust. And that trust cannot be developed overnight. It gets built over a period of time. And I think organizations should not wait for challenging times, but should at all times ensure that they maintain a very authentic, genuine engagement with their employees, understanding their aspirations, ensuring that there is enablement for them to realize their dreams, making sure that their potential is being nurtured and aligned to the organizational vision as well. And that's what good HR does in an organization. And it's not the job of the HR professional alone. It's the job of every leader in the organization. And if and when that happens, I think overcoming these challenging times is not really a difficult one. That's my point of view on this.
So it was great listening to you of how you told that not only HR, but also the leaders as well as the line managers have to work in tandem to create the employee experience. That is the key differentiator in today's time when we see the VUCA world and mergers and acquisitions becoming the norm of the time. So I would like to pass on to my dear friend Vandana for her next set of questions.
Thank you so much, Sekhar. So my next question would be to Dr. Santroop Mishra, sir. So while going through your journey in the book Leaders in the Making, a thought came up to my mind that we have a wider range of generations functioning in the workplace at the current time, wherein 4 distinct generations are working together in a stressful and competitive workplace, because of which intergenerational collisions are among the crucial management concerns faced by the leaders of today. So just wanted to know your perspective about it.
Well, first of all, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Soil. Thank you, Anil. Thank you, Vandana, Shaikat, Aditya, and Professor Bhattacharya for hosting me. I'm very honored and pleased to have 2 of my very distinguished colleagues and friends, Marcel and Harish. Both are outstanding HR professionals and, more importantly, are remarkable human beings. And I feel very fortunate to be in their company. So thank you, Vandana, for that question. At one level, multi-generational gaps are real. At another level, they are not real. The question is, what do you look at? At the end of the day, we are human beings. And as human beings, there are far more similarities between us, irrespective of generation, than perhaps differences. But if we choose to over-highlight differences, then we will see those differences more. That doesn't mean that there are no differences and they don't pose challenge. But I think perhaps somehow it has become a bit of a romantic engagement by people to overemphasize the differences rather than see the commonality. At the end of the day, both you and I perhaps like music. I may like music of a generation, you may like another generation. In fact, that creates an opportunity for us to discuss about music, which could be our common passion, cutting across time horizons, to say, how was music in my time? And how is music in your time? How was it delivered to me through Geet Mala of Ceylon radio? Whereas how is it delivered to you through Spotify? The medium of delivery is different, and genre of music is different. Maybe I didn't know. हम उसको ठुमरी कहते थे, आप आजकल rap कहते हो. I don't know. The labels could be different, the beat could be different, but we share a common passion called music. Similarly, at workplace, the commonality between different generations is each one of them want to be successful. Now, what is success? There may be 15-20% variance between what we look at success, but we all want to be successful. And the ingredients of success perhaps haven't changed very much. Hard work, commitment, trust that Harish talked about, continuous learning, whether you learn digital or you learn TQM. Maybe when we started our career, we learned TQM because that was important at that stage. Today, perhaps learning digital is important. But just because you learn digital and I learned TQM at the beginning of my career doesn't make us any different. Both of us want to be successful. But having said all of that, I think there have to be more platforms created for people at workplace to have conversations, to surface where the real differences are, where the common grounds can be achieved, and to figure out how people can work together and what each one of them can offer to the other. Younger generations can offer perhaps reverse mentoring on technology, new concepts, new theories, new science, all of that. Older generation can contribute scenario planning, building, different experiences, and all of that. How do we create that common ground? Many, many years ago, I remember that I had invited a bunch of college students at lunch table to talk to some of my senior colleagues. It was part of a training program in Aditya Birla Group. And a lot of my senior colleagues said, what do we talk to them? I said, that's precisely the point. We have lost our ability to talk to younger people. Figure out how to speak with them. Then only at workplace you'll be successful. Today in Aditya Birla Group, about 40% of my workforce is below the age of 30. Now, how do people have a conversation? So I think there are some real challenges, but I think all of us need to focus on what the common grounds are rather than over-focus on the differences. That's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That was really inspiring. Moving on to the next question, Aditya.
Hello, sir. Marcel.
Hello, Aditya.
So I'll like to ask you a question, but the first panelist told us about having a culture of engagement while you need to trust, and Dr. Sadrup told us about how to deal with a multi-generational workforce, right, sir? So based on that, I would like to put up a question in front of you. That is, diversity and inclusion in an organization has evolved a lot. So could you share some thoughts about its trajectory in the future and how it can impact on employee satisfaction?
Thank you, Aditya. That's a very interesting question. But before that, I'd like to just say thank you to Anil and Soil for hosting this. Very, very honored. And of course, to our host, to the original authors, Dr. T.V. Rao and Arvind Agarwal. And it's a real pleasure to be here with Sadrup and Harish. And let me now try and answer your question, Aditya. See, D&I has become fashionable in the last few years. We've always had D&I. It was perhaps given, shall I say, a title a few years ago, and everybody scrambled out of the D&I wagon. The easiest was to look at gender. And statistically, perhaps 49 to 51% of our total population being ladies. It was easiest to go that way and talk about how D&I would make greater inclusivity at the workplace. I think D&I is far, far beyond gender. And if we dig a little deeper, we're all familiar with phrases like affirmative action. And affirmative action is not something which is very new to us. It's been there. It sometimes is, we choose to ignore it. Sometimes we choose to live with it. Our own society in India is a very, very diverse society. Just look at the sheer number of official languages we have, not to mention the unofficial languages and dialects that we have. It's really, really mind-boggling. Our cuisines, for example, change perhaps every 50 or 60 kilometers if you travel down a road. So D&I has been there with us. We've learned to live with it. Have we embraced it? And that is the million-dollar question, which actually I think most corporates are struggling with. And as I said earlier, gender was the easiest way to look at it. But if you were to look at, for example, getting people in the workplace with alternative sexuality, if we were able to look at people who are, I think the old term used to be physically handicapped, but who are now called disabled or whatever, new and newer names are invented for some of these to make them polite. The fact of the matter is that if we are not able to have a completely diverse workforce, also, if you recall, some time ago, the government of India insisted that there be more women on boards. And everybody scrambled to find the women who could be on the boards. But has corporate India really embraced D&I? And what are the kinds of things that we should be doing? Sometimes leaves me a little uncomfortable, because sometimes we do things to be fashionable. Sometimes we do things to ape the West. But as a country, we are so terribly diverse, terribly, terribly diverse, that it makes me proud to be an Indian. To the extent that in order to have diversity, yes, perhaps the easiest is to start with gender. But a few years ago, a company, I shan't mention the name, realized that they didn't have enough senior women leaders. So everybody scrambled to go and find all sorts of young women to come and join the company, hastily put them through training programs and say, here, we've got our quota, and the CEOs tick the box. Did these young women really get absorbed into the organization? Were they able to cope with most companies in India are run by males, senior males, and it gets worse in the West, where it's run by white males. Now, here we're talking about young women being brought into an organization, the infrastructure not being ready, not just the physical infrastructure, but the ability to absorb them into the workforce, to provide them mentors, provide them coaches. So I think on a 10-point scale, I would say, at the risk of being a little controversial, we're probably not more than 3.5 to 4 on our D&I journey in this country. And if we don't get our act together, we will not be able to engage suitably with all the varieties of D&I that we have today to make a really, really diverse workforce where people are respected for what they bring in terms of their talent. So I'll stop here. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a perspective.
Yes, sir. Your words on like that, how this is going to set up precedents for the future and how it has happened in the past is quite amazing. And the example that you gave of squeezing changing after every 60 kilometers probably encapsulates the idea at its best. So with this, I'll again hand over to Swaika for his next question.
Maybe Aditya, in between, I can actually have I had one burning question in my mind, if I could ask.
Yes, please, sir.
You know, I was going through this book, and I would like to actually show this book to all my audience, Leaders in the Making. Now, Harish, I was actually going through your profile, and it actually gave me, you know, such a wonderful feeling of, fullness. You came up with this whole concept of HR being business HR. And nowadays, you know, HR business partner is something which has become very common. And HR has become more of business rather than being, you know, a back-end sort of a role. I was just wondering, and I think this is very relevant to even Marcel and Dr. Mishra also. One question for all of you, in fact, you know, you can just give your thoughts on this. You know, we all talk of Industry 2.0, where we are looking at automation, robotics, IoT, data, analytics. So the entire role of HR probably is getting impacted. And if so, how is the role of HR getting impacted in this new Industry 4.0 paradigm that we are actually undergoing? So we can start with Harish, maybe.
Thank you, Professor Bhattacharya. In fact, my take on HR is maybe slightly controversial. I think HR is not a function. HR is not even a profession. I think HR is a practice. And that's a practice which is very essential for any organization or institution. It cannot be contained within a function. It cannot be the responsibility of a few people. The practice of HR, that is about valuing the human beings, the people in the organization, nurturing and developing them, and getting the best out of them for the organization, is a practice that needs to be cultivated. And a few people have the responsibility of planning for it. But the entirety of the leadership in the organization, be it at any level, they have to really own it and they'll have to steer it. Irrespective of the changes that are happening in our context, be it robotics, be it workplace, the future of work, the automation, whatever it be, people cannot be dispensed with. The focus of people might change from one of assembly to one of coding, to one of strategically planning, to one of meeting customer needs. But people are bound to be there in any organization. Numbers might vary, focus might vary, but people will be there. The people who are there, how do you make sure that they are aligned to the organizational vision? How do you ensure that they give off their very best, that they feel committed to the cause, and they actually inspire and support each other in this? That is the HR practice that needs to be nurtured and cultivated. And I don't think that will ever go out of style or fashion.
Great.
If I might add to that, Professor,
yeah,
I think Harish has put it very nicely as being a practice. And one of my very early learnings was that the public sector, who sometimes are looked at askance by the corporate sector, have this outstanding, shall we say, process that nobody can actually head an HR function unless he or she has spent several years in business or in a customer-facing position. So your question, I think, is very, very relevant, linked into what Harish is talking about as a practice, that the impact is going to come because I think, regrettably so, many HR people are still living in silos. And even though you may have moved away from the command and control kind of atmosphere which many of us grew up in our younger days, and the ability to be seen as part of business seamlessly. I once did a very random survey with a few young HR people, and I said, how many of you have actually gone out with the company salesman to meet the end customer? And I'm sure you won't be surprised to find that nobody raised their hand. And they said, why should we do that? The salesman come and tell us what's happening in the marketplace. A few years ago, I worked for an organization called Xerox, and that was the early days of office automation. And I still remember with great love and affection, jumping onto I was several years younger, of course, jumping onto the back of a motorcycle of a young service engineer and going into the heart of Dharavi. I had no idea what Dharavi was, where in the heart of Dharavi was a young entrepreneur trying to sell copies of paper, making copies at some ridiculous cost. And in those days, a photocopier had to be placed in an air-conditioned atmosphere. Fortunately, things have changed. But the examples that I learned from interacting with that customer helped me so much. So I think HR has to kind of get off the high horse, be part of this practice, be immersive, and two things. Do not fear numbers and do not fear technology. I'm not so sure that we are even teaching that today in our business schools to our HR students. That's my case.
Thank you, Marcel. Dr. Mishra, your take on this? Aditya
Well,
Birla is probably one of the forefront, organizations in IoTs and robotics.
Well, Professor Bhattacharya, it's fascinating. Harish talked about whether HR is a profession, whether it is a function, is it a practice. I'll keep that aside for a conversation another day. But to my mind, if HR has a job in an organization, and because of which you get paid a salary, you are there, it is not a static job. The job keeps evolving and changing, along with the way the business strategy changes, the context changes. So today, if hyper-competition, globalization, and all of these phases we have gone past, we are confronted with a context and environment where you find highest forms of digital technology being adopted, automation, altering the way we do things and connect with each other and everything. I believe in that context, and historically, if I look at HR, job, if I call it, whatever you have, has always been to prepare people in organization to adapt, cope, and lead sometimes the process of change as they can discern what is emerging in far horizon or in near future. Today's immediate challenge to my mind before HR is to upskill and reskill people in the light of automation. Because everybody has had educational degrees and qualification even in technology where it is already outdated. Every 5-6 years technology goes and therefore you are outdated. So this continuous reskilling and upskilling to cope with emergent technologies where you are employable, you keep yourself relevant is perhaps one of the primary responsibilities of HR. The second part is the man and machine or automation, as you call it, conflict is as old as the Luddites when the steam engines or the spinning jenny came and they broke the textile machinery. But today, the man does not see himself or herself outside of the machine. Because with virtual reality, augmented reality, you are inside the machine. There is biometric, there is speech recognition therapy. You can clone a Professor Bhattacharya at the same time to appear in free campuses of soil in different parts of the world. So the person and machine conflict today is becoming more of an incorporation. The other day, my son has bought this equipment called Oculus, and I had put it on and I was trying to play with some characters, somewhat table tennis. I had to do nothing. I had to just move my hand. I'm actually hitting a ball. It was so real. After 15 minutes, I was perspiring. I was playing table tennis with somebody, a digital guy. I used to tell him hi. He says hi from the other side. It was so real. I was playing blackjack on a casino table now. So I think HR's job today has to be, as Marcel rightly said and Harish talked about, to create excitement about technology. Help people to find ways of making it user-friendly, easy, and make it accessible, and make it a partner of theirs in the journey of productivity and continuous relevance. That's how I look at the role to be.
Very good. Thank you. And especially when we actually see organizations which now have, say, a headcount of more than 1.5 lakhs, 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs. So many things have to be automated. Otherwise, probably, it will be very difficult for jobs to be done within a time frame. Great. Now I can actually hand it back to Striker. You can come up with your second question.
Yeah. So I would again like to ask Harish sir a burning question that I've been in my mind. So sir, we are facing industry 4.0. It's just at the door, and at the same time we are having multi-generational workforce to the maximum of 4 generations at the workplace. So what do you think should be the key focus for the upcoming HR professionals while they try to curate an employee experience that is appealing to Gen Z at the same time to the baby boomers at the workplace?
This is nothing new. This is something that's been there from time immemorial. Any organization starts with a certain template. And then when new employees come in and the company expands to new geographies, the template that you started with loses its relevance. You have to keep adapting and adopting newer versions to make it relevant. Okay. And now you may have multi-generations people at the workplace. Now, if you are caught up in the old school of trying to have a single template to fit all the people that are there in the organization, of course, you're going to fail. You're going to struggle. Somebody is going to be happy and somebody is going to be completely, ignored. And what we really need is that touch with every employee and understand that every employee is a unique person with unique dreams, with unique skill sets. And how do we tap them so that they become completely excited to be part of your organization? We can't customize it to an extent where you have free for all, but you need to tap into their innermost desires and capabilities and see how can you sort of align it. And that's the challenging job for HR, not to come up with a policy that meets everybody's needs, but to be able to reach out and engage and sort of excite people. And to do that, you can't do it alone. Of course, you got to inspire the whole set of folks in the organization to understand this reality. And you may have to be the trainer. You have to probably build skills, coach line managers to be able to do this exceptionally well too. Yeah. And that, therefore, you become a catalyst rather than just a functionary or just a trainer or just a recruiter. Yeah. You got to be a catalyst who actually creates this new gen thinking and a multi-gen engagement capability in your colleagues. And that, I think, is the opportunity for HR today.
Thank you so much, sir. It was nice listening from you how HR can work as a catalyst and actually a growth enabler while ensuring employee engagement at various levels, always and across the various generations as well. So I'd like to now pass on the baton to Vandana for her next set of questions, please.
Thank you, Sekar. So my next question would be to Dr. Santook Misra, sir. So I quote you from the book Leaders in the Making. Changing goalposts, moving targets, and not settling for just what is on one's plate has been Santook's way of leading his professional life. Also, complexity is something that Santook relates well to. So, sir, in this VUCA world where every step is a challenge and full of complexities, then, sir, what do you suggest? How one should deal with it?
Marana, first of all, thank you. That's not my quote. That's what authors have written. And they're being generous and very charitable. But look, I think Charles Darwin, who wrote the famous book Origin of Species, and a lot of us in India always believe that he wrote about it's the survival of the fittest. But actually, it has been the survival of the most adaptive. And I think that's the beautiful thing about human beings, is that we have been kind of biologically programmed to be adaptive. That's how you find that there are people who can keep a fast during Navaratra for 10 days and yet be energetic. People can do different things. So we are adaptive. So I think question to ask is our ability to adapt. Some of it is inborn, but some of it is a learned behavior. We have learned, accumulated experience and other things. Today, perhaps the rate of change outside is accelerated so much that we have perhaps got used to that. And I think we would be surprised if nothing is changing around us, because disruption and, the brittleness, the fragility and frequency of change is so rampant. So I think one of the, couple of things is, I believe our parents, our school, our teachers, our life, our early mentors, our managers, our leaders, and our friends, colleagues, all through their own experiences have subconsciously prepared us to remain adaptable. But what we need to watch out is that how do we not get a sense of being overwhelmed with the rate of change that is going around? Ask oneself that which are the parts with which I can reasonably deal with, and therefore focus on those parts rather than worry about parts that are completely out of your control. If Saudi Arabia increases oil prices, you have very little to do with it. However, you can look at your own vehicle to say, am I driving my vehicle in a manner that it is consuming more fuel? That is within your control. So in the VUCA world, there are always two parts to be discerned. Things that are within your control or can be within your control with some innovation, smart thinking, alteration of lifestyle, approach to issues. And there are things that are beyond your control. I'm not saying the things that are beyond your control, you must not try to influence. You can try to influence through professional bodies, coalitions, chambers of commerce, diplomatic route, United Nations, interstate dialogue, and whatnot. But if you cannot influence, you must not develop a victim syndrome either. As a productive, active agent of change, as a human being, someone having leadership mindset, accumulated experience, you must therefore all the time find opportunities to say, how can I take control of my life, aspects of my organization, by purposeful, proactive, deliberate actions and steps in areas where I can control this. I think that is the best way I would think I would cope with things that are changing around me. Thank you.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. Moving on to the next question, Aditya.
Yes. So I would like to tell to Marshall sir that while working at Modi Xerox, Chandramani sir has been one of your colleagues, and we are fortunate to have him as our teacher for performance management system here at SOIL. So based on that, I would like to ask you a question that since you have worked in a startup environment at Quest, how to design an effective performance management system which ensures employee well-being and also helps to create a unique organizational culture. Like it is very relevant in today's context because we are hearing a lot about layoffs and retrenchment across IT and various sectors. And the follow-up question to Harish sir would be that since you have served in the board of a public sector bank, so like in a public sector unit, how such a performance management is designed? And to Satrup sir, since Aditya Birla is like a dynamic conglomerate and one of the biggest in our country, so how does this ensures that the employee well-being and the creation of the maintenance of organizational culture is kept relevant?
That's a mammoth set of questions, Aditya. Thank you. I shall try and attempt the first part, which you want to know. I'm so delighted to know that that Bridge is part of SOIL, because he's an outstanding individual, and we we work together very, very closely in putting together a lot of good stuff. Now, I think one great advantage I had after being in the corporate world for my first innings was to actually work in a startup, which Quest was, and it was called IKEA in those days, where you were trying to sell a service which very few people had, there were very few takers for it. You had to create the awareness for the service you were selling. And with the amount of skepticism that there was, and we're talking of the gig economy starting, going back almost 15 to 17 years, today the gig economy is there all upon us, is that what do you want to measure? What are we measuring? And is that measurement a fair account of the capability of the individual? You brought in young people from different organizations who in the beginning really didn't know what this was all about, what they had to go and sell, how were they going to go and sell it, and were they just good talkers who were able to convince somebody to do something for 10 rupees less compared to some other service supplier. So the way we started looking at our basic performance management system over there was to get the people who actually ran the business to design their own performance management system. It was a bold step, but I think if I look back at it in retrospect, it worked, because people were sick and tired of having huge targets thrown at them by bosses above them, who every time you said, I've done 11 out of 10, and the guy says, look, but you should have done 18, because that's what we hired you for, that's what we pay you for. So you have a system where people are I'm talking of many of the frontline sales jobs, which was where we started really, was how do you create a system which is fair, which actually measures the output of what the person is doing. And I think one of the great advantages of a startup is that you have the ability to also experiment, to fail sometimes, to very quickly course correct. And I think we were able to get in young leaders who were able to see the way that the system worked, that it was an ongoing system. Yes, there were hard targets. Did you meet your sales numbers for this month? Did you do X, Y, or Z? How well did you do it? But very quickly, as the startup grew, we also realized that you had to have a system which was transparent. And all of us are familiar with bosses doing performance appraisals for employees on the back of a bus ticket and saying, I don't need to, you're good at, here, we'll see about it. We're all familiar with those kind of stories. But here, the dialogue was not just mandated, it was actually programmed in such a way that the dialogue between a boss and his subordinates or his reportees was mandated in such a way that they had to cover 4 or 5 different things. Very often HR sat in to guide these guys. And from there, a rough system, it took us, I think most performance management systems take at least 3 years to settle out before they become acceptable. We developed a rough model of what worked across different businesses, because Quest is an umbrella really for the number of businesses that are there, ranging from very simple concierge services to food services to Swiggy type of jobs to engineering jobs, that kind of thing. And it was a process of evolution over 3 or 4 years. It took us time. I think we made a number of mistakes. But I think finally we got it right, because when people come back and say, I trust your system, I think that itself is remarkable. So I think this is one example of what we did in a startup. Over to Harish.
Yeah. So interesting that you want to contrast, different kinds of organizations on this realm of performance management. Yeah, public sector banks, like many public sector organizations, have some things which are almost cast in stone. Yeah, promotions, your increments, they just happen by time scale, by just effects of time. Yeah, and therefore performance management has for long remained a kind of a sideshow. something that needs to be done. Somebody is asking for it, and therefore you fill up some forms and do it, but it really doesn't impact you or your career or life. So one of the things that I was involved in as a board member was to try to get the senior management in the bank to appreciate the value of performance monitoring or performance focus to really achieve the organizational objectives. And not necessarily at an individual level, at an overall organization level, are we prioritizing on the right things? Do we know what success are we seeking in these areas? And how do we measure the progress on these dimensions? And when they started to sort of apply this at organizational level priorities, they started to see the value of leveraging these to drive performance. And slowly and steadily, they started adopting it for the senior level in the bank. A Bank of India has something like about 50,000 employees, and people keep moving every 2 years, and they keep doing different roles. A system, to drive a system through the organization, takes a mammoth thing. But if it has to happen, it needs to happen with conviction of people who are going to really see the value of this. And that's what Bank of India did. And many other public sector banks have done that too. So at the end of the day, it's about experience that tells you this works. And this is how we sort of adapt it. And it can actually deliver results. And slowly and steadily, it starts to take roots in those organizations. And this is not necessarily public sector versus private sector. This is true of any organization. The organization leadership needs to believe in it. They need to sort of ensure that they walk the talk at the top level, and then it slowly gets embraced at different levels in the organization.
So Aditya, I suspect this might turn. I think thank you for saying complimentary things about the Aditya Birla Group. You share the first name with us, so I'm sure we share a connect there. Harish said interesting, before I go to the question you asked me on well-being and culture, I must just add to what Harish said, that often in India, we, for very wrong reasons, have despised public sector. I had the privilege of serving on the ONGC board. And once we had a board meeting in the Bombay High on the oil platform, which we flew down. And as I stood at that platform and looked around, there are mass of water, this massive, gigantic structure producing self-reliance for the country. I could not but truly feel extremely proud about what this country has created and public sector has created. I must say that even in our search for careers, compensation, they may not be our preferred options for leading institutions like you. But once you're part of that, you realize what a great sense of belongingness, a nation building they have created in this country. So I hope my colleagues in public sector, those of them on your show, hopefully they will relate and appreciate, Harish and I saying the challenges and also the greatness about it. But coming back to the Aditya Birla Group, you said about well-being of employees and culture. See, as we talked in the previous answer of mine, we were talking about people being adaptive. And the only way you become adaptive is by learning. So very often in organizational context, when we talk about culture, we have a very static view of culture. But I don't think, unless an organization is highly insular, an organization's culture remains static. It's a constant process of renewal, change, learning, while preserving what is core to you. I think challenge before every organization and leadership is being able to answer the question, what is core to you that is unlikely to change, even if everything changes? Because that is who you are and that is why you exist. In that context, I think care for people, by care in the broadest sense, care for community, care for employees, care for everything. As a nationalistic organization, as an Indian organization, as a patriotic organization where late G.D. Birla shared a warm relationship with Mahatma Gandhi. As you may know, Mahatma Gandhi was shot dead in Birla House in Delhi. Many of you who are students of history. Care for everything around you has been an important element of the culture. So therefore, employee well-being naturally as a corollary or a fallout of that has always been central to what Aditya Birla Group has been, and that is reflected in our retention level, productivity level, employee engagement, and every metric that you can talk about. And it contributes to our employer brand because, during COVID, other times, what we did for our people and have done always has attracted people. And today, despite being an Indian multinational, we're able to attract people from all parts of the world, from all sectors. People who have all their lives worked with MNCs outside of India have come and worked with us and, 10, 12, 15 years. So culture's one pillar has been care. Other pillars similarly have been trust, empowerment, our value system. All leaders talk about it. We are perhaps one of the rare organizations in our performance appraisal. We also have a value appraisal. You have to rate how well have you lived your values, and your manager also would rate. And we'll have a discussion around that issue. And there are 100 different ways we embed the values as a foundational thing of the culture of the organization. And now we do it purpose. And the good thing is, long-serving managers and leaders of the company have been both elements of continuity and change for the organization. They preserve and protect what is good and great about the organization in cultural terms, and also demonstrate learning agility to learn and bring new things to the organization. So the two have kind of kept the organization growing. And in my 27 years, the company has grown from 1.6 billion to close to 60 plus billion, hopefully this year end. And that has all been possible because we have managed to preserve the good parts of the culture and yet continue to renew ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was great hearing from you. And as you truly said, as we have seen in the past, present, and going forward, we are sure in the future also, companies with a purpose are going to be in the business. So now, in this context, before we end our webinar, I would like three of you to provide your quick comments on how can HR help organizations adopt sustainability as a way of life in going forward. We could start with Marcel, sir.
Second, before that, let me introduce Sneha has actually joined.
Okay.
And I think she messaged me that she was stuck in traffic. So Sneha, if you can briefly introduce yourself in a minute.
Yeah, hi, very good evening, everyone, and all the dignitaries on the call. It's very pleasure for on my end to join the call. So I've been associated with Soil in the batch of 2018. And all through my journey in Soil was very transformational, and the way I am today, and I am implementing my thought process and whatever are the strategic initiatives and inputs where I am giving into my organization, or everything are rooted from Soil itself. So right now I'm working with JSW Group. So 3 years I've worked in corporate of JSW Steel, and now I am spearheading entire HR gamut for the new entity of JSW, which is JSW One Platforms, which is into the tech space, which is into an e-commerce entity where we are serving MSME customers and B2C customers through our platform. So this is what I'm currently doing, and I'm very glad to share this space with all of you.
So good. So Sneha has been a meritorious student. She has been a very strong brand ambassador of Soil, and she probably was initially skeptical about joining JSW because IT companies normally attract the younger generation. But subsequently, I think she's doing an excellent job, and she has got many accolades for that.
Yeah,
so, maybe we should give Sneha an opportunity to ask one question to any of the panelists.
Yeah, I'm hearing sir's this thing. The thing is, sir, you rightly mentioned where in the current generation of Industry 4.0, where everything is being transformational, where we are blurring the lines between people and technology at this point of stage. I understand where everyone are looking for an adaptive mode of workspace and very customized mode in terms of millennial requirements or Gen Z requirements. In that space, coming from a traditional organization of JSW, or I've seen a group companies which are majorly promoter-driven organization, somewhere I feel the leadership team, rather the C-suite leaders, I know they know that the importance to operate in a distributed manner models wherein the leaders need to lead the edge of the change, and they understand the importance. But the buy-in from the leaders is still a challenge in the current scenario, right? In this current space, how we can strategize our HR inputs and HR processes to get a leadership buy-in from Gen X people. Majorly the C-suite leaders in the traditional organizations in India are majorly Gen X people, right? How do we get that buy-in to the organization, which will become more collaborative and change-oriented? That was something still challenging in my mind. It would be great if the panel would
Thank you. Sneha, is that a question for me?
Rather all the panels, because I see everyone have shared the background of traditional organizations. So,
Well, first of all, I think I would not label organizations as traditional. In every organization, the elements of tradition, which is very good and important.
correct.
And the organization, there are plenty of elements that are modern, new, contemporary, etc. That's point number one. Point number two, you got to present inspiring role models in front of people. If you look at Amitabh Bachchan at 70 plus on Kaun Banega Crorepati, I don't think he looks traditional. The guy uses a computer screen and learns, he makes a video call, he transfers money, he uses as many technologies as possible in a short period of time. What just goes on to say that if we can inspire people of older generation to see the value and, provide them all of that, give them little time, not be judgmental, but to understand that learning new things does take time. And I think we can also get them to engage in the process. So I'll stop here, but I know there's time running out, so I'll leave it to my co-panelists to give their comments. Thank you.
Just to add on to what Santrup is saying, I would say that, never look at the C-suite leaders as people who don't get it. Yeah, so they have a certain amount of wisdom coming out of experience. They have some constraints to live with. They have the organizational vision as much as anybody else does. And they're keen to sort of engage everybody. But what it takes is to be able to influence them with your ideas, with your thought process, with your suggestions. And when you have to influence, you have to find the right way of influencing different people. So you got to figure out how to influence these set of people who are there in the C-suite. And maybe it's about exposing them to a reality which they are not seeing. Maybe they have an unconscious bias, which you need to sort of move the veil out of their biased eyes. And also to be able to give them the kind of inspiration of energy that the youngsters have in wanting to do something. The passionate energy itself will be something that they will be willing to sort of support and allow it to expose them to some new stuff. I think that's the opportunity that the youngsters have, rather than say the C-suite people, the old daddies, they don't get it, and things like that. It's your opportunity to influence them, to inspire them to support you. That's the way I would turn the coin.
I think that's a very interesting one, both Santrup and Harish have mentioned. One way of looking at that is sometimes for so-called, they are the kind of traditional companies which you refer to, is to experiment with the shadow board of youngsters. And I am aware of a couple of very successful organizations in this country who have actually brought in shadow boards of younger people who are extremely effective. And the appointment in the shadow board is not permanent, it's by rotation. So every X number of months or years, these youngsters are rotated. It's an opportunity for recognition for them. And as Harish says, you have to get the attention of these people. And you get the attention by not producing very fancy PPTs or whatever it is. You get the attention by showing ways, simple ways, without using jargon, or sometimes, you do need to, in being able to bring that about so that a senior person sees the value of this younger person. Santrup also earlier mentioned sometimes using reverse mentoring. It works fantastically. I've seen it actually working. So these are a couple of things there that you might want to look at.
Thank you, sir. That was very much insightful. And now I request ANB sir to give vote of thanks for the
Anil would like to
panelists.
hear the last word.
Yeah, are you able to hear me?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes.
So I just want to say that what a delight it has been to experience the energy of my three colleagues. And I just want to thank them from the bottom of my heart for giving us this opportunity to serve by creating this time and this space in which people are reflecting and learning. And I'm sure the depth of this conversation will be felt several days after this event has been hosted today. I want to thank Dr. T.V. Rao and Dr. Arvind Agarwal for writing a fantastic book to showcase these three people. And thank you, my friends, for doing the honor and giving the soil the opportunity to serve. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anil and the team here. Wonderful discussion. Really enjoyed it. And I hope this creates more opportunity for all of you to reflect and take this forward. We're looking forward to the next set of leaders to take the world forward.
Definitely.
Thank you, Anil. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Harish.
Professor
Thank you,
Bhattacharya.
Master. Thank you, Dr. Mishra.
Dr. Bhattacharya and
Thank you.
to our young friends for thinking through these questions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.